Welcome to the Marketing and Storytelling presentation as part of the Illuminate nextgen challenge. My name is Adam Mostogel, and over the next couple of minutes I'm going to take you through the structures and the strategy you need to have behind your marketing, but also take into account how to tell your own stories through your marketing materials, but also through your other presentations. Now, the first thing is to define what marketing actually is, because marketing is a very broad theme, and sometimes we only just think of it as the promotional aspects. But as you can see by this definition on the screen, marketing is actually the activity, set of institutions and processes for creating, communicating, delivering and exchanging offerings that have value for customers, clients, partners and society at large. Now, that is the American Marketing Association, and while I don't need you to memorize that definition, I want you to think through some of the things it's talking about. It's actually talking about that marketing is the part of creating your product, your service, what your solution is. If you start making decisions with your customer in mind, you are marketing because you are creating it for your customer. Now, communicating is the promotions. We all understand that part, and we're often bombarded by those marketing messages. And then the delivery aspect though. So do you actually live up to the promise that you're given? If you have a really clean, crisp ad and you walk into a shop and it's a bit messy and a bit dirty, the promise doesn't match the delivery, and it is really important that you get that right. So that's why marketing is a lot bigger than just the promotions, and that's why we're going to talk through some of the structures to create your idea and how that might influence your thinking. Now, the first thing you need to think about is who your customer is going to be. Not everyone will be your customer. Just because you're so nice and friendly and you have a great product and you think everyone's going to appeal or like this, they are not your target customers. You've got to look at who will most likely use or purchase your solution. The reason we use or purchase is sometimes there's different types of customers. We have users and we have purchasers. Users are people who benefit from the solution. They use whatever you are selling. But the purchasers might be the people who pay for it. The easiest example to talk about here is probably children's toys. The user is the child. They have to like it. It has to light up. It has to do all sorts of fun things that they love. But the purchaser is probably the parent or a family member. And they also need to see that there is value in this. And so you need to think about who those groups are. And as you start to think through this, you start to build a bit of a category. Okay, who is the person that's going to purchase our idea? Well, they're your target customer. And it's with that in mind, then we start thinking about, okay, how do we segment our target customer? How do we create a category for them? And there's probably three ways you can divide them up into segments. You can talk about demographic factors, and there's a range there on the screen, but you might think of a certain age group. They might all be working. They might potentially have finished university. They might be of a specific gender, family size. They might be married. That's something to think about. Or maybe it's their geographic factors. Whereabouts do they live? Are you only appealing to certain customers in a certain area? Or behavioral factors. What's their lifestyle? What's their culture? What do they like to do? Are you picking back on something else they like to potentially be your target customers? You should define your target customer. Use those factors to define this group. Consider the benefit that they're getting from purchasing your product or using your service. What are they getting out of it? And I would recommend, if you can, to even go as far as to start to think of how many people are in this group. Are we talking about a big group or a small group? Some businesses will have multiple groups they're targeting. They're targeting one certain customer for this, one certain customer for this. I would recommend to define them all so it's really, really clear who your customers are. Once you've defined who your target customers are, then you can move on to actually creating a marketing strategy, because then you are talking about what those customers need. And often we talk about the 4 P's of marketing: product, promotion, price, and place. But in a modern economy, we're starting to see the customers have a lot more power. There used to be the mentality, build it and they will come. Not anymore. The customers are going to argue for things and create a stance around certain things. And so the 4C model that's on the screen is looking at a customer-centric model. Now, you might find this actually connects with you better, but the 4 Ps is that sort of typical strategic approach, but we will look at both of them because they both do connect. So let's start with the product. First of all, you've got to be able to understand what you're actually selling. What are you giving your customer? And what do they get out of it? Yes, you might buy a mobile phone, but it's got glass, it's got a USB port, it's got a headphone jack, whatever that is. Great, that's the physical properties. But that's not the reason they're buying it for the physical properties. They're buying it because of the value they get back from it. So you might actually be selling someone freedom or time or something else, a healthier lifestyle or something. So you need to just think through, what are you actually giving your customer and what are they getting from it? Is this actually a priority for them? If it means a lot to them, they'll value it. So it's just something to think through. And then the value they get back out of it. So are they actually getting a saving or a benefit from interacting with you? So this is really thinking about your product, but then also how does your customer interact with it and what does the customer get out of it? The next P is the price. What's your price? How have you set that? How do you even know if your customer can afford this? Can they? Is this something similar to what's already on the market? Or have you sort of priced it thinking, oh, wait a minute, I already know. It's like you hear a lot of things that talk about it's equivalent to a cup of coffee a day, because that's looking at the alternative solutions. If that's a daily habit, how do you put your price point at a daily habit that people feel okay paying? Also then think of what's the value that's returned. Potentially you're saving them time or money or something else. Is that actually something that they sit there and they start thinking about the cost? Well, actually it costs me $10, but I'm going to save this money in the long run. That's worth it. And that's some of your thinking that you need to put around it to say that, yes, this is the strategic thought behind what our price is going to be. The third P is place. So where does someone access or purchase your solution? Where can they go to do it? And how easy is it? Make sure that you're really clear about the ease of purchase, because if it's not easy to do, customers will not do it. How do people even know it's there? Is it on a main street? Is it on a website that's easy to find? Is it hidden in a back place because you know what, they'll come to you no matter what? Make sure you clearly explain why you've chosen this place. Obviously the C for here is convenience. So not only is the place important, the physical location, but how convenient is it for a customer? Is it easy for a customer to go to that place and interact with you? It's something you need to think through in your marketing strategy. Once we've got those P's sorted, then we can talk about promotion. So you've got to start thinking about, okay, how are you going to promote your idea to your customers? And what are the different ways you're going to do it? Social media, sponsorships, newspaper articles, radio ads, however you wish to choose. Really know who in your target customer group are you trying to talk to with each and every single one of those channels? And what type of messages are you communicating? Be really clear to know what are you trying to tell people and what sort of things are you trying to share. Obviously, the digital components are far more dynamic, video, audio, everything else. You can create something really dynamic, but say, for example, a newspaper ad, it's one-dimensional. There are still different messages you can share. What are those messages you're trying to share? The reason we talk about communication, though, is customers now want to talk to businesses. They don't just want to be talked at, they want to talk with them. So make sure you're very, very clear about how your customers can talk with you, how they can share stuff, how they can ask questions of you, because that's really important. They can do that as part of those 4 Ps. Now that's our marketing section. Let's move into our storytelling for change. Now we've developed this in partnership with the ABC through their Haywire program. They've given us some great tips and resources here that I am sure that you will benefit from. So we've got to start with, why do we even tell stories in the first place? Well, we tell stories to inform people. It's a great way to share information. We entertain people. There's nothing like sharing a story in a really entertaining or funny or interesting way that people remember. We use stories to connect. Often stories lower the barriers. People talk through something and they start to understand it. Stories stick in people's memories. You are more likely to remember a story than you might remember some facts and some figures, because the story you kind of get in the flow and you make most of it work. So stories work really well for that. Stories are really great at putting people in someone else's shoes, because you start to talk about the feeling and the emotion around it. And stories are extremely powerful to influence change, which is why we want to share this with you. See, we've done a lot of research, and so we're talking about statistics, and that's a lot of head sort of thinking. The stats work, they make sense, we understand why the stats are there. But realistically, we're also emotional beings. We connect with stories, we connect with people. And so you've really got to make sure that you have that heart connection as well as the head connection in what you create and what you share. And storytelling is really, really powerful. And it's from this perspective that the ABC has this motto. It's on the screen. Never stats without story, never story without stats. That's from the ABC journalists. That's what they write about. If you have a look at any story online or on the news that you will have seen, there is normally an individual case. There's someone's individual story, how they've been affected by whatever the news article is. But then there's some stats in there that back it up, that start to talk about the fact that this is not an isolated case, but you're really leaning in because you've heard an individual example, you've heard of a person that's dealing with it, and it makes more sense because you understand them, and then you start to see it's a bigger thing. That's what the ABC shares, and I encourage you to take that on board. How do you tell information that's both stats and story together? You can't do them individually, you have to do them together, and that's what's really, really powerful. So with that, you've then got to think of what makes a really, really good story. And there are some really simple tips. First things first, talk them in. How do you get them to sit up and take notice? How do you get them to listen straight away and actually listening to your story? Describe a moment, and I want to unpack this a little bit more because moments are how you get people to stand in your shoes. You've got to look for turning points. A great story, a fantastic blockbuster movie always has a turning point in it, or multiple turning points. Here's the world as it was, and all of a sudden this happens. Oh no, and the story changes, and you're hooked in because you've seen the turning point. And you want to see it fixed. You've got to make your stories relatable, though. I've got to be able to connect with it. I don't want to hear a story about something that I have no knowledge of, or no connection with, or no interest in. So make sure that the audience connect with your story. But it contains some new information so that they're actually learning things along the way. They don't want to just hear a story they've heard before. What are you sharing with them? What are some new insights that they don't otherwise know? The last thing though, be clear about your message. Be very, very clear about what you're saying so that your audience knows this is why we're hearing this story, because ultimately we're talking about a story to change people's thinking. What do you want to change? How do we tell a story that points them in that direction? You don't want to have a story that they can kind of get a million different things out of. You're trying to change their thinking. So what's the one thing that you need to be sharing with them? Now, in terms of making your story, telling a moment, it's worth thinking through. What's the problem that you're trying to tackle in the challenge? And then from there, find a moment where you or someone close to you experience this as an issue. And there's some starting words there. I saw, I heard, I felt, I smelt. I felt alone. I felt the hairs rise on the back of my neck. I heard cars in the distance and a scattering of paws behind me. I smelt. I'm not sure what I smelt. It was new. It was foreign. It was there. The terminology. That's the thinking that gets people in. Now, obviously, that's a very particular way of telling it. But simply by saying this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened is not a story. It's just a recount, and nobody's going to fall into that story. So make sure that you use the emotional words about getting someone to be in your shoes. That's how you tell a moment. And when you do that, you then have a story that will connect your audience to your issue. And that's really powerful. You want your audience to know that this is a big issue. This needs to be tackled. We need to deal with this. Sometimes stats work, but stories work really well with them. So look at how you can tell a story to connect with your issue. Now teams, obviously, as mentioned, this has been designed in partnership with ABC and Haywire. The reason they're working with us is they want to talk and tell more stories from Australian young people. So if you're interested in sharing your own story, please use abc.net.au/Haywire. Great way to have your story heard, and there's some fantastic storytelling resources on there as well. And so please use that and get the benefit from it. Now teams, we've run through marketing, we've run through storytelling. Let's bring this to a close with what you need to produce for the challenge. Well, first things first, you need to create your marketing strategy, and there's a number of components in this. You need to look at the strategy that you're going to take, some social media content, and other marketing collateral. It all needs to be uploaded via the team resource guide, and check your binder and the website to get the correct deadline for your group. Now, in terms of your marketing strategy, you're going to write the 4 Ps of marketing, plus who your customers are, plus how much it costs for you to market. We've talked about the 4 Ps. We've talked about your target customers. The new part is your cost of marketing. However you are going to promote your business, it will cost you money. You've got to be able to cost that out. If you're going to build billboards, how much does it cost? If you're going to print flyers, how much is it going to cost? The cost of marketing is you justifying that, yes, you know how much it's going to cost and it is worth spending the money on. That is your marketing strategy, and it is to be written as a maximum of 2 pages long. Your social media content, you are looking at how you're going to promote your idea on a social media platform and you need to create some content for that. You've got a table on the team resource guide that you can look at as a template. It is also here on the screen. Create a 3-column table when it's going to be posted, any visual content, and then the written content. And the image on the screen here is a piece of content that I created for the West Coast Wilderness Railway, and it tells you when it was posted, what the image was, and the text that goes with it. We want to be able to see that you've got some really good strategies and creative content that you're going to share. Not just one great post, but a series of great posts that talk to your audience. The last thing is to choose 2 of the following marketing materials and make sure that you let the facilitators know so they can clarify anything they need to clarify. I recommend teams to choose 2 different forms of marketing collateral. So don't just choose 2 of the same, choose 2 different ones. And on there you've got video commercials, so maybe a TV ad, a YouTube commercial, there's certain requirements around that. Your audio ads, you might record and send in the audio file of a radio ad or something for Spotify or something else. Create a website maybe and send through the link. Maybe some printed material, you might make a poster, a flyer, a brochure, a newsletter, menu, something else that works for your idea. You might want to design an email newsletter, and actually how would that land in someone's inbox? Or maybe create a newspaper article or a story. There are certain requirements on the Team Resource Guide template that will tell you what needs to go into each of those submissions and how to submit them. If you need to ask, please ask your facilitators as you go through it. Otherwise, teams, that is the marketing and storytelling presentation. Good luck.